Good morning. It's Tuesday, January 27th, 2015. This is Tech Talk Today, episode 122. 122? Man, I didn't think I'd get past 100. So I'm like 22. That's borrowed time now, I think. But it's a good thing because we are here today to talk about some serious stories. We've got some positive stuff we're going to end on. We made sure I got on the stream early this morning and I put the chat room to work immediately. And I said we've got to end on a positive note because the rest of the show is kind of like a bag of dicks. And to help me go through that bag of dicks is our Mumble Room. Time-appropriate greetings, Mumble Room.
Hello. Hello.
Wait, what did you just call me?
Put your gloves on, guys, because unfortunately, the weekend brought us some bad news. And so we're going to go through some of this because it all has some pretty serious ramifications on technology. Let's start in France, where they're seeking to sanction web companies for posting or publishing terror posts, which even includes linking to things that might be considered provocative, like maybe the cover of a magazine that has somebody on it. And so this is legislation that's starting here and beginning to work around. And of course, it's in the wake of the deadly terror attacks earlier this month. The French government has been looking for laws that would help prevent violence incitement. And they think one way to do this is to crack down on speech online. Now, I'm pretty far removed from this, but I'm wondering if anybody in the Mumble Room, who's maybe a little closer to the situation, has been watching this, has any thoughts on this.
Well, the thing is, it's one of those, they want to go on to solve problems, and they're latching on to any of the easy things they can do immediately, and it's really easy to go and just have a whole bunch of people looking at everything posted online, right? So...
yeah, I guess what doesn't resonate with me is so this would include, like, for example, Google News or Twitter would be held to the standard where they couldn't link to something that would be maybe considered inciting violence, and that seems like a pretty easy way to start stepping on free speech. And it seems like it's being done sort of not as a way to protect people, but in a response, sort of capitalizing on a tragedy. Of course, I'm kind of a skeptic, I guess.
Yeah, I'm pretty confident that nothing like that would fly on this side of the pond, just because we have that First Amendment. They're not going to allow that.
They're trying to do something similar after we had a mass murder a few years ago as well, where they tried to invent terms like responsibility of speech as a counter to freedom of speech.
So in the UK, they're also trying to push through what we're affectionately calling the Snoopers Charter. And what's interesting is one of the guys behind this trying to bring in this communications data bill is a guy called Lord King of Bridgewater. Only in the UK would you get a Lord King of Bridgewater. And he said, "I'm not a tweeter. We have Facebook and Twitter. Someone tried to explain WhatsApp to me. Somebody else tried to explain Snapchat. I do not know about them, but it is absolutely clear that the terrorists and jihadists do."
Oh gosh.
Oh.
Yep.
Well, how can you not just say the same thing about the Jupiter Broadcasting IRC or chat in
That was
WoW?
already on the list.
Yeah.
It's incredibly depressing that these are our leaders.
I know, and hopefully some everything they're sometimes when they put this stuff out there, they go as far as possible, so that way when compromise is reached, it's not as compromised, but there still is perhaps room for compromise. And so I don't want to panic. I mean, I don't want to get everybody upset, but I think these are stories worth watching because they could even have ramifications on I don't know how it would work, say, for Jupiter Broadcasting if we link to something in Tech Talk Today, or more likely on Filter. Would I have to block it for our French listeners? I don't understand, or would I not have to worry about this law at all? And
I don't think you'd have to worry about it.
Well,
You're
then
beyond their jurisdiction.
So then what happens is then only the big companies...
Well, that whole beyond jurisdiction doesn't really work in the global community where people can reach across and speak to local law enforcement and get something done. Look at what happened to Kim.com in New Zealand. That was under the direction of the US government. It actually works worse the other way around. The US government, Team America, go around the world enforcing their view of what is right and wrong, and maybe it should come back the other way as well.
Yeah. Well, and I was just going to say, of course, if you want to be of a certain size and have a certain reach, like the Googles and the Microsofts and the Yahoos do, and then you have offices in these countries, and then you have to respect the laws that you're operating under there. So what it ends up doing is, even if maybe small guys like Jupiter Broadcasting or DuckDuckGo don't have this applied to them. The real information central points, the portals of the world, your YouTubes, your Facebooks, your Yahoos and Googles, they all will have to follow these rules. And that's where the majority of people are.
We've got people who work on Ubuntu who live in China and just can't access some of our resources because they're hosted by companies like Google who are blocked there.
All right, let's shift gears a little bit and let's talk about malware. So over all of the Snowden leaks, a lot of people have gotten a lot of different bits of information. But one of the more interesting things is some recent publications have shown light on perhaps something we've all wondered and speculated. Researchers at Kaspersky Labs have discovered shared code and functionality between Rain malware platform and similar platform described in a newly set of Edward Snowden documents that were disclosed 10 days ago by Der Spiegel in Germany. What they found is the keylogger called QWERTY. Allegedly, I love that their keylogger is just called QWERTY. Allegedly used a so-called Five Eyes, used by the Five Eyes, leads them to conclude that the developers of each platform are either the same or work closely together. So they've taken source code and notes and project titles in the Snowden documents and said, yeah, it looks like these were US and Five Eyes backed malware that's been spreading around the web. Interesting that to take Snowden leaks and combine them with already discovered information. I think that's a fascinating bit, and maybe one of the more interesting. A lot of the Snowden leaks have not revealed a lot of military-type operations. They've obviously revealed domestic spying and corruption, but they haven't really revealed like what we're doing militarily, except for a couple of things in China. This is one of the big things where journalists have put it all together on their own. So I thought that was kind of noteworthy. All right, moving on. This next story is also a bit of a stinker, and Totes called it. I need to have a red book for every show. A sheriff's representative group is pressuring Google as of December to drop the ability to track police and report police incidents in Waze. The Register is reporting on a request from the U.S. National Sheriff's Association, which wants Google to block its crowdsourced traffic app Waze from being able to report positions of police officers. Now, of course, the Sheriff's Association says the information is putting officers' lives at risk. The police community needs to coordinate and have an effort from Google to not essentially allow people, what they say is to stalk police officers using Waze.
So I've heard this argument before, and they go and they claim the right to go and to track people, right? I do not see any reason why the people should not be able to track police officers in that same reciprocal idea.
Well, and what's interesting is Waze is kind of famous for sharing information with local law enforcement agencies. They have a lot of deals with a lot of cities now where they'll share traffic information.
Exactly.
And
I see no problem.
If you've used Waze before, you'll know too, it doesn't necessarily say it's a traffic or a speed trap or if it's a cop just on the side of the road. It just tells you there's a cop in that area. So it's not like it's putting a lot of it's not giving you a lot of information, a lot of details.
I think this kind of thing would be driven underground. If you've got an app like Waze, there's no reason why someone else couldn't spring up another app similar to that and, keep that information under the radar.
Yeah, that's what's going to have to happen, right? But isn't this the downside when a big company buys an indie app like this?
Well, here's one thing that a lot of people don't realize. When there's a speed trap set up, the officer, at least in the state of Washington, has to be visible. Because if they're not visible, it is considered entrapment. And in the same respect, the cop just being there is law enforcement, not necessarily pulling people over and issuing them tickets. That is only a component of law enforcement. Enforcing the law is just a matter of being there so that you basically like saying, okay, he's here. If I do something stupid, I'm getting pulled over. So that's pretty much where it comes down to.
I just thought that the day I heard that Google had bought Waze, I said it that day. I said, all right, well, the cop reporting is going to go one day. And here's what the Sheriff's Association is saying. And I love this approach. This is kind of genius on their part. They're saying, Google, do the responsible thing. Google, before we even have to have legal action, before there's ever any court action on this at all, before we even have to get to that, Google, be a good citizen. And let's get this feature out now, before there's ever a problem. Don't wait, Google. And now they're going public with it because they wrote Google a letter on December 30th, and Google has not responded to them. So now they're tagged. Somehow they think people will rally behind their cause by taking their request public.
If Google can opt out of me tracking the cops, can I opt out of the cops tracking me?
Yeah, right? I mean, it's the whole thing is, and here's, let's, before we go any further, and then we can talk about this further from this. Here's another story in the lineup that, in my opinion, it's about tracking, right? DEA, the Drug Enforcement Agency in the United States, the people that are front lines on the war on drugs, making sure all them pot smokers are going to jail. Their cameras are tracking hundreds of millions of car journeys across the United States. And this has been known, but what's now been revealed is the extent of the sharing of information. They said that they are able to track a car when it drives across the entire U.S. now by taking pictures with over a series of 1,000 cameras that have been deployed, and they use this and they share information across all of the states. The DEA has seized a ton of drugs. They have originally put this in operation in 2009, have been expanding it ever since, and have been expanding on the information sharing. They can share with all kinds of government agencies the information they get. The government right now is able to collect and retain the information. The ACLU is fighting this. They say the ACLU has said the government should not be able to collect or retain information revealing the movements of millions of people across the United States with no crime. But even that long retention period they currently have is only meaningful if it comes with strict rules and limiting data use, sharing, and access. They need to create. The ACLU says they need to create a retention policy, and the DEA needs to make these policies public. So here they are, essentially, just straight up tracking your movements. Right, and then at the same time, they're saying, but don't give the public the ability to track our movements. And the thing is the movements that we are tracking with the police officers here in Washington State, and I don't have a lot of experience driving in rush hour traffic in other areas, but in Washington State, if there is a police pullover event and they pull somebody over, that essentially decimates traffic for about 35 minutes. I mean, it literally, it could make my drive go from 45 minutes to an hour and 45 minutes sometimes.
And that's because of the pull over and slow down law.
Yeah, and the thing is everybody slows way down, but also the roads are kind of narrow, like in cities like Everett, where there's not a lot of shoulders, so people have to drive around them, and it's often raining, and by about 4 o'clock it starts getting dark, right? So if there is a cop on my Waze map, I don't avoid the area because I'm trying to avoid the cop. I avoid the area because I can save at least 15 minutes. So for me, it's massively valuable. And it's more valuable than just slowdown information because I'm able to make an educated assessment by looking at that map. And the thing is, it doesn't tell me the police officer's name. It's not tracking everywhere that police officer goes like the DEA is doing. It doesn't even tell me if it's a traffic pullover or just a cop sitting there having lunch, right? I have no idea. I just know he's there. The thing is, they're getting a data feed from Waze, so they also know where I am. It's a two-way street with Waze, people. Now, they don't know my exact name, but there's a Waze ID. And you have the DEA sharing images as you drive across the United States. It's a pretty screwed up thing.
Yeah, and, that's one thing. I drive on I-90 quite a bit going over to North Idaho. And the thing is, I mean, if there is a cop, if I see that little alert on Waze saying there's a cop up ahead, watch for it. That makes me more alert. That makes me look for that cop so that I don't say run them over. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's part of it. But also the other side of the coin is that exactly what you're saying. If there's a cop there, they are not necessarily doing a speed trap. They might just be doing paperwork. Mm-hmm. I can't tell you one time I was working security for a construction site, and there was a cop that drove in. I'm like, think to myself, wonder what's going on. So I approached the cop, and the cop's just like, oh, I'm just sitting here doing paperwork. No big deal. Is there anything I can help you with? I'm like, yeah, I'm just a security officer here. I want to make sure that everything's okay.
Yeah, yeah.
So
I think it you could look at the paranoid crazy side, like people are stalking police, which I haven't heard of, but also, if when I see a police pullover or a cop on Waze, I will watch out for him so that I don't bump in, hit him as I drive by, and also I'll slow down. So a cop could, in theory, be way more productive at helping people drive according to the law and safely with Waze than without.
I know. That's the irony of the whole thing. But the thing is what happens is then you're not speeding, my friend. And then when you're not speeding, revenues drop for the police department. And then we have a problem, don't we? And then you get the Sheriff's Association involved.
I heard a statistic, and I can't remember where it was, but if the Google car succeeds, Google cars obey the traffic laws. And the country would lose like $8 billion in revenue.
Yeah, of course.
Where does the Sheriff Association get their revenue from, and should we not fund them anymore?
Oh, well, that's a whole other problem, isn't it?
Taxes.
You know what? I think Popey's right. I think Popey's got it. The indies will step back in and solve this problem. And let's go super indie. Have you guys heard about this youth-built secret, well, it's not really a secret, peer-to-peer Wi-Fi internet that's cropped up in Cuba? So it's fairly semi-recent. It's been going on since the early 2000s, but it really took off in the last 5 years. And it is a group of people that are working together. It's essentially being led by one person, but it's a whole bunch of people working together. And they have strung together a pretty competent peer-to-peer network. Inexpensive but powerful hidden Wi-Fi antennas and Ethernet cables strung all over streets and rooftops spanning the entire city. Disconnected from the real internet, though, their network is limited, local, and built with equipment commercially available around the world with no help from outside government, the organizers say. Hundreds are online at any moment, and they're playing games like World of Warcraft, Call of Duty, and some endpoints have connections out to the internet. They're slow. Like sometimes like a couple of hotels have satellite internet, and they've linked up their satellite internet to this. And also I think they have a connection to Venezuela that is like a single pipe, but they can also use that. The Cuban officials actually do know about it, but the local group has set up a policy of no porn and no politics. And the government, in that light, has essentially allowed them to continue on. And it's essentially limited too. It's all just local there. I think it's pretty neat. It's kind of amazing they're able to build a semi-reliable network on commercially available hardware. And they say they have to protect the country, and that there's at any given week 9,000 users on the system, and they feel like as long as they keep the politics off, then the Cuban government, they're good with it. And they have blocked users in the past for breaking some of those rules. They say users show a lot of respect for preserving the network because it's the only one they have. So there's sort of like a social order to it, which is kind of amazing to think of, like a 9,000 person internet. That's amazing to think about that.
It's a testament to the beauty of the protocols.
Yeah, really it is, isn't it? Yeah, I'm really impressed by this. And what I wonder is maybe now that some of the relations between the U.S. and Cuba are changing, maybe more U.S. businesses go down there, and if maybe they bring in some internet, do they wipe this whole thing out, or do they connect to this thing? Because you could just say, all right, well, you take, if say it was me, right? If I was like a hotel, I would come in, and I'd be a fancy hotel because that's how I roll, and I would lay down the fiber or whatever it would take to get a good solid connection, and then I would go to these guys, the guy that runs this SNet, or SNet, and I would say, all right, how about this? You run the local infrastructure, I'll pay you a flat rate, and I'll connect you up to the internet. And not wipe them out. I mean, that seems like you got 9,000 people. They managed to make this thing work. According to this AP article, it's actually a fairly reliable system, and they have speeds that are far surpass some of ours, right? Because some of these machines are talking at full Wi-Fi speeds to each other, so they have some pretty good bandwidth too.
Yeah, and this reminds me of the mesh network I talked to at Siegel. And,
right.
was just mentioning that he was involved with them, which is kind of interesting.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, it's called the Seattle MeshNet project, and I'm not in Seattle anymore, but when I worked on it, basically we were trying to set up an alternative to ISPs using some different software networking protocols, and we ran into the problem that Seattle is just way too hilly, and we couldn't get enough money.
Oh, interesting.
It's either going to be the IMF that plows that under, or some big American telco. It doesn't matter if it works or not.
Maybe.
It's the money.
That's pessimistic, but I would argue, and I would say this, if they already have something great in place, that's now the competition, that if a U.S. company or somebody comes in, maybe it's a Russian company, comes in and lays down a bunch of maybe let's be optimistic and say it's fiber. That'd be great. Yes, you may be able to sell that, but you have to remember that there's not a lot of money for these people to work with here. So there's probably not going to be a huge revenue potential immediately. So perhaps it'd be pretty hard to compete with something that's already in place. And once it's in place, essentially, except for the cost of equipment, free to run.
It's just beautiful. Your young, fresh, idealistic ideas. One day they'll be crushed, but it brings pleasure to listen to them now before that happens.
actually, I was just listening to something yesterday about Cuba getting their internet connections, and the real question was, will they trust any American company? Because they are aware of the Snowden leaks. They are aware of all the spying that happens on America's own people, so why would they do to Cuba?
That's an interesting question, too. I suppose that's, again, that may be another source of potential competition for whatever comes in there. And I think it's kind of neat that... I guess where I look at it from afar, and I think, gosh, everybody has probably thought this once, like, what happens if the internet just really goes to hell in a handbasket? Like, the commercial interests just really mess it up, or the government comes in and really messes it up. Like, what happens, right? And I've always thought, could we create a mesh net as users? Maybe even if it was just like the, 1% of the internet that's super technical. If we could create, between Wi-Fi access points and cell phones and, VPN tunnels, maybe we could make ourselves a private internet that sort of ran over a mesh infrastructure. And I always think, no, it's impossible. It can't be done.
Interestingly, I read about a project in villages in the middle of places like Africa and India where they have not internet but store and forward, where you go to a building where you type your email and it goes into a computer, and the next time it's a disconnected computer, but the next time the village bus or delivery van or the refuse lorry drives through, it also has a computer, and they synchronize, and then when it goes on to the next village, it synchronizes with that village, and as it does its circuit, it synchronizes all the computers, so your email gets forwarded much like the traditional email would via the postal service.
That is so cool.
And that way you don't have to have wires strung long distances or satellite communication or anything like that. It gets there when it gets there, and it does so via infrastructure that's already there.
That's really slick.
They've successfully tested TCP/IP using carrier pigeons.
I realize that's a joke, but they have effectively done that.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but this is like in the real world.
True.
Just one more thought on that. Eric Schmidt from Google actually did say at one point, actually fairly recently, that the internet will cease to exist, and he's probably right, because every technology innovation that happens does cease to exist at some point. Now, what takes its place? Well, I was thinking to myself, it's got to be mesh networks or some complex version of that.
Or I think was he saying that? I'm trying to remember the quote, because I remember I read that too. I think maybe what he was saying is that the internet would become so abstracted away that we wouldn't think of the internet. Like, what we think of as the internet now, TCP/IP and routers and all of that, is going to be so far removed from the user experience that, sort of like how we don't think of the relays and switches for the power subsystems, the electricity that comes into our house, we won't even think of it. I think it's kind of what he's saying. It's not that it would actually go away, but that it would go away in the sense of perception, and it becomes an implementation detail. And you could see that, like if I would always imagine like a real true mesh network is eventually probably going to have to connect back to the main internet at some point. And the real true beauty implementation would be a system where your mobile device can seamlessly switch between, a network that's maybe layered on top of mesh devices and the standard internet. So that way, if your traffic does have to go over the regular internet, it's still encrypted, it's still tunneled, and then it would go back to a mesh network whenever possible and be transferred over that. I mean, you could see a lot of ways where maybe, and if everybody's living in Facebook and everybody's in apps on their mobile devices, the internet does just become an implementation detail.
Well, only time will tell.
I wonder if it would have any corollaries with like the post-apocalyptic movies, like the Mad Max, and that where civilization goes through that. This is the online kind of civilization. I wonder if it would break down into small,
I think so,
city-states or something.
I think it's going to be more like Adventure Time than anything else. It's not gonna go very good. And to make all this happen, you're gonna have to have better batteries, right? I mean, all these devices, if you're gonna be mesh networking like a Mo, you're gonna have to have better battery life, because it's gonna be sucking down the battery. Doesn't matter if it's your laptop or your phone. Problem is, sometimes batteries explode. Well, our last story today, batteries are now being designed with bulletproof Kevlar fibers, so that way, if they blow up, they don't take your dick with them, or your vajayjay, depending on your setup.
You had to go there.
So it's obviously a pretty important problem. The problem is they can explode and catch fire. You guys, I don't know if people outside of Washington are as hyper familiar with it as we are, but here in the Pacific Northwest, it was a huge deal when Boeing 787 Dreamliner was finally taking off and the battery caught fire, and everybody was talking about this for weeks and weeks here in Washington. So something like this would prevent that from being a problem on an airplane. And they have a picture here on the Gizmodo where they're like lighting it on fire. Wow. I am always watching for incremental improvements to battery life because, geez, this needs to be an area that has to get addressed. It's 2015. Where's my mini fusion reactor? So Kevlar is. I was just gonna say Kevlar is also a good electrical insulator, which is also a bonus. What were you gonna say?
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's a great electrical insulator, but at the same time, you also have to figure out ways to cool the battery because that's why they're lighting on fire. They're basically outputting too much power and overheating. Basically, what it's coming down to.
It's true. The University of Michigan is also working on a new insulated material that's so thin it will actually allow more electrodes to be packed into a similar size battery, increasing energy output of the existing size batteries. When it goes into production sometime in 2016, it might not only mean that smartphones will have a lot more battery juice, but they might stop exploding. Wouldn't that be great? And, you think about something like the really super smartphones that are coming down the road. They're going to need more juice, too.
I think it's funny is that the Motorola Droid Razr actually has Kevlar on the back. I'm not kidding.
Oh, that's neat.
I think it's funny that their selling point is does not explode.
Yeah, it's not a big problem for me, but, you do see those freaky pictures online, I guess.
Will it still burn?
Well, no, it's supposed to not burn. Has anybody ever had a cell phone battery explode on them?
On purpose.
Oh, okay. Well,
I've had one bloat. My HTC Hero battery has bloated a bit, so the back doesn't fit on anymore. It bulges out a little bit, but I've not had one actually explode.
So I guess that might be getting close eventually to bursting. I've never even had that, I don't think. And I've had a lot of damn phones, so I'm just wondering like if it's just maybe a luck of the draw or if it's charging behavior or age. I guess maybe sounds like yours, Popey, is just age over time, huh?
Yeah, I mean it's my very first Android phone.
Yeah,
and I don't know how long ago it did it, but it's a while ago, so it wasn't a spring chicken, but it wasn't brand new.
So I wonder on these metal phones like the HTCs and the iPhones, are they just gonna do the phones just bend? Do they just warp the metal when the battery starts to expand? I guess they must, right?
Well, I had a laptop battery that actually did bulge on me one time, so I would imagine so.
I'd imagine the circuit breaks inside.
Yeah, right.
Before anything.
Yeah,
because that's the thing that's going to give.
Right.
What I've seen with most new phones is actually usually the front of it has that Gorilla Glass or whatever it has on the front of it, and it actually bends and it pops right off, and all of a sudden you'll just have the guts of the phone sitting and have the back of the phone just sitting there. Yep.
Huh. That'd be funny to see. Also disappointing if it's your own phone.
Sounds like a Tarantino movie.
Yeah. A bomb by phone. All right, so let's wrap it up there. I'll give a quick plug for our Patreon page, patreon.com/today. We got a few projects on the burner, and we definitely could use some funding for it. One of them you know about for sure. How to Linux is getting spun up again, and we are funding the reproduction of that from the funds over at patreon.com/today. So I want to make sure the guys that are working on that get supported for their contributions, so that way it's not just like, after so long, they've worked so long for free. As we launch new projects and new efforts, I'm trying to work in a way so that way people get compensated for their time from the beginning. So that way it's just factored in, and that way it's fair for everybody. And the only reason we were really able to do that is we had two options. We could take sponsors on immediately, and that's certainly a possibility. And it would honestly make it would make a lot of money for the network. Or we go this route, and this is because honestly, I'm not trying to get super rich doing this. I just want to be able to have a job and support myself and my family and anybody that works with us. This works for us. And I think it works good for you too, because it keeps us laser focused on the content. Like when How to Linux launches, you'll see it's just really, it's going to be straightforward, focused on the content. And this model allows that, and allows us to be more true to the podcast medium. We don't have to fancy it all up with cool intro billboards and all this stuff for the sponsors and then come in with the reads. And, it's fine. It works for some shows, but there's some shows where it just doesn't fit. And that's why I really appreciate you enabling that. Over at patreon.com/today, we could use some supporters. Wouldn't it be great to get to 440 this week? That really would be fantastic. Patreon.com/today. Help fund the whole Jupiter Broadcasting Network. And then you get some thank yous in the activity feed, like behind the scenes video. And of course, you get this very show as a daily thank you. Patreon.com/today. Also, if you want to just contribute to the show, you can join us live, hang out in the Mumble Room. Great turnout today. Great to see everybody. I really appreciate it. jblive.tv, 9 a.m. Pacific, noon Eastern, and you just hit bang mumble in the chat room, and you get the Mumble server. You can also help title the show and hang out in there. techtalktoday.reddit.com is the place to go to contribute stories to the show. If you can't make it live, it's a great way to participate. Really trying to get more involvement over there. techtalktoday.reddit.com. Some interesting stories there. So even if you don't get enough in this show, you can always find some more there as well. So we got a couple of more videos to play. I've gotten a sense that John Cleese, at least old John Cleese, doesn't play as well with the U.S. audience as I expected. I don't know. I haven't gotten a lot of positive feedback on these videos. I think they're hilarious. They're just enough funny, yet still selling I think this is some of the best ads Compact's ever done. Too bad it's from the 80s. So we got a couple more John Cleese videos to play this week, and then I'll end it. Just consider this one for our friends across the pond, because I get complaints I don't play enough videos for you guys. So the U.S. audience, seems like dry humor only works with about half the audience. Yeah, see, I don't know. Fraggle Daz thinks it's lost on them. I don't think so. I don't think they're dumb. I just think it's not a humor that's common in our culture in the U.S. Perhaps that kind of real dry stuff. But it sure works for me. So, and hopefully it'll work for you at home. Here's one more John Cleese commercial. I think we'll probably do maybe one more after this. Depends on if you guys like him a lot. This one's titled "The Finger Trick," and again, it's from the early '80s. And it was a Compaq computer commercial. See you back here tomorrow, Wednesday through Friday. Well, we actually run Tuesday through Friday, but if you didn't know, this is Tuesday. So we'll be here Wednesday through Friday. jblive.tv. Hope to see you there. Bye, everybody.
Hello. Well, we've finally got ourselves sorted out this end, and I now have some information for you about Compaq Desk Pro computers. The ones that are too heavy to 70 megabytes, 8 megahertz, 286 chips. Dual mode monitor. I'm sorry, this simply isn't interesting. Instead, I'm going to take the top 2 joints off my index finger.